Hey, it's John again from VETtoCEO and Folla Capital, and I'm here with Michael Johnson today. How you doing, Michael?
I'm wonderful, John. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be giving this interview today.
Yeah, now I just want to disclose to people watching this, I usually know the person I'm doing this interview with, so I want to be learning just like everybody else from scratch. So I'm excited about this one today. So I want to thank you for making the time to be with us today.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. What you're doing for veterans is great. I wish I had connected with you before I bought a business, but I think it's better to get my story out now than not at all.
Yeah, man, I can't wait to hear your stories. But let's get right into it then. Let's just cut to the chase. Can you just briefly describe the company that you bought?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the owner and operator of SpeedPro Northwest Raleigh. We're right here we're actually located in Morrisville, North Carolina, right next to the airport, and we do signs and graphics.
Oh,
That encompasses everything from no parking signs, handicap parking signs, vehicle wraps is a large portion of our business. And then we also do work for the local museums. If you go to a museum and you see a label on the wall, somebody had to make that label. When you see even the decals on the side of a semi going down the road, somebody had to put that on there. Right up to your hours when a new store opens and they put their hours on their front door, that white vinyl, we do that white vinyl too. So we kind of do a lot. I consider ourselves almost a fabricator more than just a sign shop, because we really do have a wide range of capabilities.
cool. Now, Speed Pro, the brand, is that, and you got the sports car or racing car type of stuff that I've seen. Does that have anything to do with the brand name, or is that just a coincidence, or is it speed to get the job done?
Paid to get the
What's the
job
brand name?
done. I don't want to name all of our competition, but Fast Signs, Sir Speedy, or is another printer out there. So the print industry as a whole always tries to double down on how fast you can get things done. There's one that's Science by Tomorrow, and we're Speed Pro. So we just highlighted speed and kind of left off that we were doing signs. You have to figure that out on your own, or I have to explain it.
Oh, cool. Is it a franchise? I don't even know.
Yes, it is a franchise. There's about 120
Okay.
of us nationwide, and there's a few more up in Canada, maybe a couple dozen in Canada. I couldn't tell you. It actually started in Canada, but we've been here in the United States for 20 plus years now. I want to say I think the oldest franchise might be 30 years old plus.
Oh, cool. All right. All right. So tell me about what you did in the military.
I was an infantry guy in the military, a ground pounder, an O3 on the enlisted side.
I'm sorry.
It's quite all right. It takes all types to make the world go round. But I know a lot of military people that are now in charge of companies. They come from the officer side. I came from the enlisted side. I was an E5, anti-tank missiles was my specialty. Cross trained on the machine guns and everything. The nice part about working in that field was we always had a Humvee to get us around, as opposed to the O311s, who were always hiking. And so during my time in the military, I did 2 tours in Iraq. I was there 2004, ended up on the front lines of Fallujah, one of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War. I think Marine Corps claims it as the bloodiest battle since Hue City, Vietnam. My second tour out, I was on what was called a military transition team, MITT, a MIT team. It was an interesting assignment. I lived on a base with about 25 Americans and about 3,000 Iraqi soldiers. So I got a whole different view of the population, being able to work with them day in and day out, and a whole lot of trust I had to have with them too, because end of the day, 3,000 against 25, we're pretty well outnumbered. But it was a really great assignment, being able to really interact with the population there and understand their culture on a very personal level. And then my last tour out, I believe I went down to Katrina for the relief effort. We were down there for about 2 months.
Okay. So how many total years did you spend in the Marines?
I did just shy of 5 years. I did a 4-year enlistment and ended up with an 8-month extension for that second tour to Iraq.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's take us into your mind when you were getting out of the Marines. Like, what were you thinking about? You're an infantry dude in the Marines and you're thinking about getting out. So put us in your mind when you were going through that transition. And, specifically what led you down to let me buy a business path as you thought about that
Yeah.
stuff.
So, I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur. Even as a kid, I grew up rather poor. I knew if I was going to make anything for myself, I was going to have to make it. Right. And so at a very young age, we'd get candy around Christmas and Easter. Would keep the candy and sell it to my brothers and sisters 2 or 3 months down the road after they had eaten theirs. So I've always been a hustler. I got a paper around 11 years old. I can't not work. Even when I got out of the Marine, you can get my friends told me, oh, you can get 6 months unemployment, no question asked. So day one on the Marines, I I go and apply for unemployment. And day 2, I'm bored. So I went and got a job by the end of day 2, waiting tables. So I spent a few years in the restaurant industry, which I think was fantastic. I had done some waiting tables and busted in high school. So it was good to get back into that. Cause if you're good at customer service, you can earn a decent living, as long as you're willing to work those long hours and nights and weekends. And when I didn't have a family, it was no big deal. I could work as much as I wanted to. So I worked in customer service, really honed in on those customer service skills. Had an entrepreneurial itch, but like no money. And so I ended up finding a job at a fabrication shop during the day. So I was working fabrication during the day, just getting completely all basically covered in soot, go kind of wash off, try to get the soot out of my fingernails and go wait tables at night. I really enjoyed the fabrication work and actually thought there was going to be an opportunity to take that shop over one day. And so that was my drive. It ended up not working out where I wasn't able to take over that shop, but I still had that entrepreneurial itch, but I still didn't have any money. So the day I left the fabrication shop, one of my customers, a crane and rigging company, called me up and said, "Hey, we're standing up a new branch." Well, actually, they acquired a new branch in Durham, and they said, "We'd love for somebody to help come up run the operations." So that next day, I was there and helping them get going. And I spent several years there, 4 or 5 years there working for them. And there I started to make a little bit of money and started to save up some money. And then I really started to hustle too, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to buy this crane and rigging company. But I was like, all right, let me just start hustling. Let me see what I can do to save up some money. Because that's the big thing. During this time too, I was also taking classes. I got my business degree and concentration in entrepreneurship, and everything is you need money, right? You got to have money to do any sort of business. And, in business school, they teach you how to do a seed funding round. I didn't have the Rolodex for a seed funding round. There was no way I was going to be able to actually raise cash. So I figured I just need to hustle and save up some money. Found a few books like the $100 Startup and Side Hustle, and helped me just get some things going, spend a few $100s, but not invest massive amounts of capital that I wasn't going to be able to recover, something I could afford to lose. Fast forward 2 years after writing a blog, I actually ended up at a conference and they presented an opportunity to write for them. I had a portfolio that I'd been writing for 2 years and said, "Hey, look what I've been doing. I've been writing for a while." And it took a little bit of follow-up. I think I had to follow up with Lisa 3 or 4 times, and eventually they gave me a test. And then I think my first month writing with them, I made an extra $1,000, and then I was making an extra $1,500 a month for about a year and a half. And all of that was just pure extra money that I was able to just stash away into savings, invest into the market, and start to grow and start to get some cash. COVID hits, and I have a baby on the way at that point, and baby shows up in August of 2020. I'm still working the crane and rigging job. I'm also writing full time. Go to the writing class. I can't do this anymore. I have to let something go. And they said, "We can't lose you. How much is it to make you full time?" So I got my first taste of true solopreneurship at this moment, and managed to stay at home and write for about 2 years there, which was awesome because I was there for first steps, first words, just there to watch my baby grow up. So it was really cool there.
That's awesome.
Couple years down the road though, everyone started getting called back to the office, and it got real cheap to stay home. And AI is coming in, taking over a lot of the writing. And I just ran out of runway there. So the cash kind of dried up, and I had a threshold. If I don't have, I can go out on my own when I have two years of expenses in the bank. If I hit 1 year's expenses in the bank, I have to go find a job. So I hit that 1 year's expenses in the bank. I go, okay, let me find a job. I actually called up one of my old suppliers in steel, and it was part of a large conglomerate. I did great at it. I was a really good sales guy because I understood all the customers' pain points. But end of the day, I was miserable working a corporate job. So every bit of commission I got, I just saved it up. And I knew I tried a few startup things that wasn't for me. I knew it very quickly. Startup's not for me. Corporate's not for me. There's this middle ground of small business and growth. And that's where I thrive, because both the fabrication shop I was at and the crane and rigging shop were basically functioning as small businesses. And I was the operator there. The only thing I didn't control without those places was the checkbook. Thought, oh, what's the big deal to add a checkbook yet? I can tell you it's a lot. But I wanted that to be my next stop. So after saving up some commissions, and I went out last year, 2024, said, okay, I'm going to buy a business. I Googled how to buy a business. It served me up a couple books, a podcast, a community, and I was commuting about 45 minutes each way every day. So I was knocking out a podcast of Acquiring Minds every day. I read Buy Then Build by Walker DeBell. and the Harvard Business Review. I just tore through those books so quickly too. And then my thought process too, even because I came from that world of writing, and I knew that I worked for this guru. I can't name him because of NDAs, but I knew that his course, which was like $6,000 or $8,000 a year, everything he taught in that course was in a $20 book on Amazon. So I was like, let me just get this $20 book on Amazon. It probably has the exact same content. And then I'll just go try to do a deal. Even if it falls through, like most deals do, I'll probably learn a ton doing it. I was very fortunate. I'm a very rare data point in this, but the very first company I talked to, I ended up transacting with. So I ended up buying this SpeedPro location, and then also actually managed to acquire a competitor a few months later to grow the business very quick. Oh, anyways, a whole lot, but that's how I got into entrepreneurship. I've been here about a year and a half. I've owned the second business for right at a year, and there have been struggles. There have been moments of great joy, and I'm on the thing right, and hopefully I can stay there. So, you want to dive there, John?
That's a great story, man. So you're one for one. The first company you went after, you ended up buying.
Yeah, one for one.
I heard you right.
And I informally launched the search in April of 2024. I had this company under LOI by the end of May. So,
how did you find it?
Biz Buy Sell.
Okay,
so
cool.
And I was looking on Biz Buy Sell. I was, I lurked on there for years, kind of knowing that businesses did transact. And I actually saw this listing several times, but ignored it because I was like, I'm not a printer. And it was listed as a print shop. Once I read the book Buy Then Build, they said go industry agnostic. That gave me enough, gusto to actually talk to them. And then I realized, yes, it's a printer, but printers are just manufacturers. In fabrication, it was a manufacturer. We bring in raw product, we put it through a machine or multiple machines, and we get an output, right? Basics are the same. Obviously, there's lots of nuances in both industries, and I've learned a lot of them over the past year or so. But once that book opened my eyes to go a little more industry agnostic, it allowed me to actually approach this seller and end up buying them.
That's cool. That's so cool. That's a great story. So let's talk about the process of buying the company. I love to ask this question. So you had expectations going into it because you read a few books, you listened to some podcasts, and then you went down that path. So what met your expectations, and then what's absolutely did not meet your expectations? And what can you share with others about what you learned from that?
So one of the things was, just try to differentiate yourself very quickly, especially with the social media landscape. There's a lot of people that are kicking tires. I just had a conversation with another business seller that he listed for his business for sale maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And he said he has gotten just inundated hundreds of inquiries. And so just knowing that you're going to have to stand out from dozens or even hundreds of inquiries, you need to think.
And they all have the same message, right? They all have the same exact message.
Yeah. And that's just it. But how do they all do the same message? From my understanding, a lot of people want to show up and start talking numbers. If you read the book, if you read Walker's book, he says, on the first thing, you should interview for the CEO position. Go in there and convince them that you are the absolute best fit for this. Worry about the numbers later. You can negotiate numbers and do evaluations all day long. And those change throughout the process too. That was actually a surprise for me that we agreed on one price. They had listed the business for 1.6 million. I offered them 1.4, and we get to the closing table and the bank does that. They call in and do a third-party valuation. Third-party valuation came in and said it's 1.2. And basically the bank was like, this is the deal we're willing to fund. It's a take it or leave it. The sellers and me both had a lot of money and time invested into the transaction at that point. And, obviously they wanted a little more, and it felt bad to me that I wasn't able to get the deal I proposed over the line. But that was definitely a shock that they did this valuation at the very end. And I was like, well, maybe next time we do the valuation at the beginning. And so when I did do my second transaction, that seller wanted $500,000. I had one other person look at the deal and said it's worth $200,000. I said, let me just call this third-party firm in again. And then they gave us a real valuation, a 60-page document, why we valued it here, why we didn't value it here. At that point, it's very defendable too. And also, I'm not the bad guy. The evaluation team is the bad guy. I always made sure that I was trying to play the good guy in everything and let the bankers, let the evaluators, let them be the bad guys. I'm just here. This is what I can transact at. And if we can't transact at those numbers, that's okay. I'm fine to walk away.
We could probably do a whole interview on that topic. I'm so glad you told that story. The mainstream misinformation that's out there is seller wants X, broker demands X, if there's a broker, which there usually is. And then, yes, 15 reasons why it's worth X. And it really doesn't matter if you're relying on an SBA loan, which is most of the cases,
Yep.
right? Because the bank's going to do an appraisal and only going to fund you at some certain level. That's exactly what happened to you. People just don't get that. So it's not worth fighting over price up front. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Even my second LOI, I told the seller, I go, I'm going to sign this for $500,000, but this is not going to be our final number. I just want you to understand that, but I'm going to
Yeah.
sign it. My letter of intent is to get this deal across at 500,000. If you can justify to lenders, because he knew I didn't have the money too. I was like, if you can justify to the lenders that it's worth 500,000, then that's where we're transact. But I just, kind of set that expectation. We're not going to. But I also
That
wasn't
is
going to fight him up
such
front.
That is such great advice because that is real world right there. And what we always talk about in VETtoCEO is that the seller is usually as naive as the buyer the first time they go to sell their company. They don't know that yet, right? So just like you learn that, they learn that. And if there's some goodwill and lots of reasons why you want to do the deals together, most sellers will accept the fact that it's only worth X, not X, but something less than X, right?
Yeah,
So
and I think that was too, like, my seller for the first deal was we were separated by lawyers, and that was his choice too. But we did it. When something needed to be hashed out, the two of us or three of us, his wife, him, and myself, would get on the phone and we would hash it out. I also asked for very little from them. Like, we sent the APA over to them, and they had very heavy-handed these just massive revisions in their favor. My lawyer wanted to fight back on every single thing. I said, no, we're going to give on 90% of this. Let's pick one or two items that are actually worth fighting over. And then I'll go back to them and say, I'm going to give you on 90%. I want these two items. And I was able to do that. I asked so little of the transaction, so little of them during the process. Like, I felt like I was just always playing the good guy. And then when it finally came to the closing table, we both had, like I said, a lot of sunk cost at this point. And and also the other thing is there's now a 60-page document that says your business is worth $1.2 million. And, and that exists in the SBA space. And I don't know how everything works on the back end, but for them to go and find somebody else to transact higher than that, I think it was going to be really difficult. And also, they had chased away two buyers before I showed up too, at least two that I know of. It might have been more, and they were basically at the finish line, very close to the finish line. And the fact that I had asked for so little, I think, did make a difference. That I was finally like, well, this is the deal that we can do, or let's stop sinking money into this transaction. And they didn't actually agree to the price right there on the phone that night, but they never pulled the brakes. And so about a week later, we had a signed APA.
Man, I'm so glad you told that story because it's happened in almost every deal I've been involved in, which is about 15 right now, including my own company that I sold. But that happens almost all the time. And that's real world. And I'm so glad you brought that up. So let's move on. So in addition to that, when you look back in the rearview mirror at your experience now, having bought two companies, what are like two or three things that you learned that you wish you knew before the journey that would be like golden nuggets for people listening to this interview?
Get the right lawyer. That's one thing. I overspent on a lawyer dramatically because I didn't really know how to find a good business lawyer for me. The law firm I used was fantastic. I'm not knocking them in any way, shape, or form, but they were a very large firm, used to working on very large deals. So I give the analogy is I needed an Uber, but I took a limousine. So I just way overspent on that and probably would have, I did. But also then after I transacted, right, as you know, your Rolodex changes. People will take your call that wouldn't have taken your call a month ago. And so I was able to make contact with another entrepreneur in the area. He actually ended up buying the fab shop that I worked at years ago. And once I met up with him at a networking event, I was like, hey, who did you use for your lawyer? And he introduced me to an entrepreneur's lawyer who was much more cost effective and understood the value of getting the deal done versus hashing out every little detail. Because the analogy I even gave to my lawyers was, look, if indemnity clause 79 on page 412 somehow bankrupts me, I can probably go around and give speeches to law schools forever about how this amazing case study happened to play out. I go, my biggest concern going into it is cash, right? Because there's no undo button
Yeah.
once you buy it. So even if I can sue the crap out of them, I've put all of my money into this deal and they've just taken $1 million plus out. They have time to fight me. They have money to fight. I now own this asset and don't have time and don't have money. So it's one of those things where you can fight over every little line. But even for me, that's why I said, let's find the real things that we really need to focus on and just let the rest go because they're not really going to make a big difference.
Man, great advice. And I agree 100% with your philosophy. Don't get me going on lawyers, but I got to watch what I say.
I do like my
I love-
second lawyer that ended up doing the second deal with me. He's fantastic. I will be using, if there are more deals in the future, I will definitely be using him and anything I need. Like, he's my call because yes, but he's just upfront about pricing. I know what I'm getting into. And I feel like his terms are very fair because he has all these templates. He's like, yeah, I've got the template. I'll sell it to you for $1,000. It's nothing for him.
That's right.
It doesn't take him any time. And if I was to go hire a law firm, I could easily spend $2,000 to $3,000 for that same template. So
Yeah, and you mentioned AI in your writing thing. AI is just like bulldozing, how much legal time you need to have
it's
on a
true.
billable basis to get a job done. That's what we're seeing right now.
Right.
All right, so you closed on the business. What's gone right and what's been a challenge have you learned since you closed on the business?
Customer concentration is a real concern that you should be very, very concerned about if you find that. I was very much in the mindset of get in the game, of listening to others gone on before me, the action-oriented guys. They will get in the game and figure it out from there. And that, as an NCO, that was the thing. It was like they say, hey, go take that hill, go take that building. You have to just figure out how to do it in the moment. And so that was my philosophy. Let's just go in there and do it. We just discovered some customer concentration. One customer was about 30% of their business. And, we met with the customer and everything. We felt very good. The bank, everybody got comfortable with the fact that this one customer was 30% of their business. And they spent, solid $400,000 with the sellers leading up to the transaction. They spent $40,000 with me. So at 90% drop. We didn't lose them as a customer. They're still our customer. But the thing is, they're a landscape company and all of their help got deported. And so we transacted in August 2024, before the election, before tariffs were put in place, before ICE got ramped up, before any of that. So I didn't feel there was necessarily a great way to do diligence this. We talked to them. They were still planning on making investments, still planning on buying trucks, still planning on wrapping trucks. And then all of a sudden an election happens, all these tariffs come in. They said, well, let's just hold off and see what happens. And then all of a sudden, all their staff starts getting deported. And you can take it or leave it for whatever that is, but that definitely affected our business. And they said, well, we're just not buying trucks this year. Any truck that's wrecked and we have to replace, you'll get those wraps. So I did manage to, sell $40,000 worth of wraps to them, which is not insignificant. I will take that business. But obviously, that was a huge drop off that I then had to make up, which we mostly have now. But it put me in a real cash crunch. It put me in a really, really tough spot about middle of last year, where we scraped bottom. All of our savings got depleted. All of my investments got liquidated. I had sold every stock I owned. I sold all my Bitcoin, which was great that I had it, right? I had made those investments and saved up, but just everything I had to go in. There was a very scary day in, I think it was in middle of August, where I had $1,200 to my name. And it was 3:00 in the afternoon. I remember this. And I'm just thinking, nothing else can hit today. I know there's money showing up tomorrow. Can nothing else hit for 2 hours? Let me get to close a business so I don't default on something today. Next day shows up. We negotiate some new terms with the bank, with the sellers, got some interest only payments going to relieve a little bit, explain the situation, the customer concentration that happened. I was just brutally honest with everybody too. And, and we're coming out on the other side of it now. We did post a loss in profits in 2025. But at one point, I was staring down about $150,000 loss. We struck that down to about a $70,000 loss by the time December hit.
Yeah, there you are, smiling.
I'm the eternal optimist, John. If I don't show up and just give it everything I've got, even in those most trying days when I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, I asked myself in the morning, if I'm bankrupt 6 months from now, what am I going to wish I did today? And I just tried to think about what future Michael is really going to think of me in this moment. And I just tried to keep showing up every day, managing the cash flow where I could, get a new customer, get a new order, get another deposit, shamelessly ask for complete payment up front. And it was surprised me the amount of times I got it. Some people are very, I'll give you a deposit or we'll pay you at the end. I'm like, but other ones I'm like, okay, can we get payment on this job? They go, yeah, sure. They swipe their credit card and it's not due for a month. And I get 15,000 in all of a sudden. So you never know until you ask. I was also able to negotiate longer term with vendor. It's surprising the amount of a lot of bankers told me no because I was trying to find a line of credit or something. And that wasn't happening. So pre-closing, I wish I had negotiated a better line of credit, or actually any line of credit. I didn't. So that was just a huge rookie mistake because on the other side of the transaction, all your financials look terrible. You're a brand new company. You don't have any revenue. You don't have any profit. You just quit your good day job and you've got, nothing to go on. So no bank will touch you. You have to negotiate before. That was one more rookie mistake that, could have tanked me. Luckily it did not. And like I said, we're definitely on the upswing now.
You haven't used the words yet, but you just described a working capital, right? And the number two reason businesses fail in general is they run out of cash. And what you just described is real world small business working capital challenges. And when you need it, you can't get it because you haven't been around long enough. You don't have the time to go fill out 52 applications and you need it like tomorrow, like you said.
And even if you fill out the applications, I talked to several the bankers are always at like the chamber events, which I tend to frequent there because those are a good place where I get business from. But all of them are like, let me look at it. And I looked at it with 3 or 4 people that I truly believed wanted to help me out. And as they looked at it, they said, I'm sorry, we can't help you. And that's why I just talking to those bankers. There's a very shady word out there. I don't know if you're familiar with the MCAs, merchant cash advances.
Oh, yeah.
It's loan sharks. It's brutal. And I did not take one out, but I was on the phone at one point. I was about to make a deal with the devil to try to survive. And then it was like, I'm talking to the guy. I'm about to actually do this deal. And I'm like, it'll probably sink me, but it kicks the can down the road. And then a customer paid $20,000. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make payroll. Never mind, disregard. I'm not signing this. And kind of hung up on him. So yeah, just one of those things. And then, but like afterwards, napkin math, I'm like, there's just no way to pay these. Once you get in on something like that, a merchant cash advance, that's it. From my understanding, my math, the way my head worked is I didn't see a way to come out of that. But yeah, you got to negotiate stuff like that before the close. Rookie mistake. And here I am.
It's a common one. That's why it's the number 2 reason businesses fail, right? People don't talk about working capital in the babbling that goes on about ETA. And you've lived through it. Everybody does. And that having a plan for that is awesome. Let's shift gears here and talk about your military experience and how it applies. But before we get there, I do want to, I've been doing this stuff, not only as an operator, but I VETtoCEO work with my co-founder, Mike Horn. We've helped over 10,000 dudes like you over the years, over 13 years. And really the kernel that we're at the source of everything we talk about is how military experience applies to the stories you're telling. And to blow sunshine up your ass for a minute, that story you just told on how you ran around with $1,200 in the bank and talked to everybody, I would suggest to you that was your leadership coming out. That probably just kicked in and was part of your DNA from being an NCO in the Marine Corps. A lot of folks that don't have that experience, I would suggest to you, might have froze. And so I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's not what you said, but I'd like to just have that be a segue. Do you never think about your NCO time in the Marine Corps as being relevant, or where are you on that spectrum?
It was just in the Marine Corps, it just taught me to figure things out, make phone calls, go ask for things. You never know what you're going to get. I remember a time in my second tour in Iraq, and I forget, we needed something from the Seabees, from the Navy Seabees. And so I was sent over there. My colonel, I was, I think, a corporal at the time. My full board colonel said, go and see if you can get X, Y, and Z from that. And so I walked in.
And how old were you?
What's that?
How old were you?
At that point, that was my second tour, so I was probably 21 or 22.
All right, folks, 21, 22. Keep going.
I'm 21, 22. I'm a corporal, Marine Corps. We're in Iraq, Camp Al-Assad Air Base. And I go over to the Seabees, and I walk in and say, hey, I'm Corporal Johnson. I'm with the 2nd MIT team. We're looking to get X, Y, and Z. Colonel Williams has asked me to send this. And they said, nobody gets anything without the captain's sign off. And I said, okay, where's the captain's office? Like, for them, it seemed to be a roadblock. Nobody can get anything without a captain's sign off. And the Navy is captain as a colonel, they're the same rank there. And so that's a very big thing. That's a very intimidating thing, as anyone knows, to go and walk into a full board colonel's office as a E4 and ask for something. My colonel told me to do it. So and then these guys gave me one path to get it done. Well, I'm at least going to exhaust that. And, sure enough, they told me where his office was. I walked in, I talked to his secretary, told him what we were looking for and who I was and who I was working for. And about 15 minutes later, I had a signed slip that said, give Corporal Johnson these things. And I walked it back to the guy that said, you can't have it because because the captain's not going to sign off on it. So, you just listen, you figure things out, you ask the questions. And if you get a no, then you go ask somebody else. Like I said, I was talking to bankers thinking I needed more money. Once I realized wasn't going to get more money, I said, what other lever can I pull? Well, what if I can extend my terms out with some of my vendors? And one of my vendors, who I can't name them here, and that was their condition. They would extend my terms as long as I don't tell anybody that they did this for me. But I went to one of my vendors and I said, anyway, I can get net 60 terms. They hadn't been net 30. And the lady actually laughed at me. She goes, I'm looking at all the accounts. Nobody has net 60 terms. I said, don't tell me somebody there does. And somebody has net 90 and somebody has net 120. And those are your really big clients. And I know those exist. I go, I'm asking for net 60. It can be a temporary basis. Give it to me for 6 months. That's all I'm asking. And I go, if the answer is no, the answer is no. You'll be one more person that told me no this week. Big whoop. She called me back a couple hours later. She goes, I can't believe this, but we're going to give you net 60 and it's forever. Not even the temporary thing. And so right then, $30,000 that I was supposed to pay the next month got pushed 60 days. So that changed my cash flow, $30,000 in the positive out of nowhere. And if I hadn't asked for that too, I definitely wouldn't have gotten it. Right. So
yeah, that is another great story. That's what we do as small business owners. We do that, right? So every action has a reaction, right? So if you don't take action, you're not going to get a reaction that you want. And then the old military concept, let the situation develop, is one of my favorite concepts, right? By taking action and just trying to affect the world around us, certain things are going to move in our direction. Most of them won't. But if we're not providing that leadership and nudging things along as leaders, we're not going to get the job done. Those are really great, real stories that I appreciate. Anything else from your military leadership that you think about that applies in your world now?
The biggest thing is just being able to figure it out, just being able to think on your feet. And just because you don't have an answer doesn't mean you're not going to find one. I will shamelessly call, if I have a problem that needs to be solved, I will shamelessly call anybody and ask them to solve the problem. And if they can't, point me in the right direction of those that can. And I also try to do the same thing for other people. Even when I was transacting, we hit a bump in the road, that valuation I told you about. I thought that was a deal killer. When I got that valuation back, my first thought was, okay, the deal's over. I tried, right? But there was a guy named Adam Markley, and he runs a massive search fund. I mean, massive from me. It might be small in some other world, but several $100 million search fund. And he was on that interview on Acquiring Minds, and it was his interview aired the day I got that valuation. And I sent him an email. I sent him a message on LinkedIn. I hit him like 3 or 4 times. And finally, I'm meeting with the sellers at 7:00 and he messages me at 6 and says, I've got 5 minutes. Give me your number. So this guy that I have no business talking to calls me up and coached me through how to go through this meeting. And it was just, I was so emotionally involved at the time. There was no way I possibly felt that I could have got my head about me to act in that meeting the way I needed to act. Just being the good salesperson, making the bank the bad guy, letting awkward silence be awkward. These little things that a good salesperson knows to do, but I was so emotionally involved and had less than 12 hours to think about it. But I reached out to somebody who I thought might be able to help me. And sure enough, he was able to help me. And he got a good dinner out of it. I took him to Denver I took him to dinner when I went to Denver a few months later.
That's great. Good stuff, man. So thanks for sharing that. Winding down now, what would you like to leave for the listeners of this in terms of the best advice you can give others? There's other veterans out there that are thinking about what they're going to do when they get out. Really, if they're listening to this right now, they're probably leaning towards ETA or being an entrepreneur. Of the things, is there anything you haven't mentioned yet that you think is a nice jewel to pass on to our brothers and sisters?
I'm going to mention the story that brought me to you. So I was listening I was flying to and from Boston on the same day a couple weeks back when Will Cunningham's interview aired. And I consider Will to be a friend of mine here. I was up in Boston for my friend's funeral. He also served in the Marines with me. And he bested me. He was always better than me. He was better than me in boot camp, in Iraq, our first tour. He got meritoriously promoted to corporal. I got in trouble and got held back to E2. Like, it was just this vast difference that he seemed to be, even at his funeral, they used the word golden. And he never found his next purpose in life after the Marine Corps. And I'm not going to get too into the weeds in it, but the fact that he never found his next purpose, he ended up dying. He ended up not just having a good purpose and found other things to do with his time. And it ended up costing him his life. He was 41 years old. And I considered him one of my closest friends for a long time. He was at my wedding. And like I said, he was always better than me too. But the fact that he was never able to find his next purpose. And I think a lot of people do that. If you get out not knowing what your next purpose is, like as soon as I got into restaurants in the civilian world, the fact that everyone was just out for themselves and like the job and the company did not matter to them whatsoever, where we're used to working for a mission and for a mission that mattered with other people that the mission matters to. And just having that, this is important. This is something that we have to do and something we're going to do, and it's something that truly matters. All my time in the civilian world working for other people, I just didn't get that. Now that I'm in charge of something, I get that again. I have that adrenaline behind me. I have that fact that there are a lot of unknowns, but I thrive in that moment. I thrive in those environments where there are unknowns. I'm captain of the ship. We're going to figure out how to get through this storm or get around the storm or build a new boat after the storm or whatever, So I think that it is a really good way to find your next purpose because everybody's dependent on you here. And what I do really does matter. I have 5 employees. Their livelihood depends on the success of this shop. Our customers, when they are wrapping their vehicles, they're not just wrapping their vehicles to make them look nice. They're wrapping their vehicles so they can get more calls. And they also get more calls from people looking for work. So it's a recruiting tool for them. It's a marketing tool for them. And it makes a difference to their bottom line. So and also a lot of people work those corporate jobs and hear about these billion-dollar projects, right? And last year we did 1.3 million in sales. And so to somebody that might seem pretty small, but we were interacting with the community the entire time. The delivery drivers, the technicians that are out in the field, working these plumbing, working these electric jobs, and then they're dropping the vehicles off. And we're understanding that their customers are excited when they pull up in these nice shiny trucks. All these things really do matter. And I feel much more connected to my community. And it just feels more important in what I'm doing now than working for somebody else. And I did struggle with mindset of dealing with the civilians. No offense, all the civilians out there, but you have a purpose when you're in the Marines. You have a purpose when you're in the service. That purpose does not exist as much from what I saw in the civilian world. But I found it much more here running my own ship.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad you shared that. I wasn't going to bring it up, but that is the story that brought us together. And if I could just add to that, what we've discovered, just to add to what you're saying, because it's evidence of it. No one spends more money developing leaders than the American taxpayer. The amount of money that's put into, like your story, 21, 22-year-old corporal halfway around the world having to get a task done, like the investment that went into you before that order came down for you to do that was immense, right? No public company invests that much money. And then when we get out and take the uniform off, we're told to dumb it down, don't use this language, and we all want a job in a cubicle in a big company. I like to say that DNA that American taxpayers invested in rots away in cubicles across the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, why don't we drive the American economy by taking guys like you? You are a perfect example, and re-implanting that DNA and that leadership into the economy, keep serving America that way. Now, again, that's not what you said, but it's evidence of the opportunity that exists for other guys and gals like you that have the same experience. So I think you're going to motivate others to do the same thing. That's why we do these interviews.
Yeah, and I think anyone was a high-performing NCO or officer, no offense to the dark side, but anyone was out there that was good at their job and just enjoyed it and knew they were good at it, they were a high performer, and they're wondering, do I have the skills for this? I would say you absolutely do, because there's no
Absolutely.
playbook, right? We're figuring things out as we go. I'm literally writing my playbook as I go, trying to document those lessons so I can come back to them 3 or 5 years later and go, oh yeah, I did solve this problem before.
Yeah.
But yeah, the playbooks aren't really there, and you have to figure a lot of stuff out. But if you're good at that, if you were a good officer, if you were a good NCO, then I think you have the skills to do it. It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
taking the leap.
Yeah. Yeah. And then not looking back. But anyway, any final comments before we wind down?
I made one note here on the list, and this is something that my banker mentioned to me was, if you're going to be going down this road and asking people for a whole lot of money, make sure you're turning a profit in your personal life. You know, if you're getting out of the Corps and you don't have a dime to your name and you got $50,000 in credit card debt, not many people are going to give you a lot of money. So that was one of the things that I jotted down because my banker made that comment. He goes, well, we're looking at it when they were due diligencing me. They were looking at, okay, he's making this much money and he's saving this much money. He's putting money into investments. He's not running up credit card debt. He's not living beyond his means. And that actually made a big difference for the banker that decided to ultimately give me $1.2 million and allow me to transact.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. Look, the reason we do these is to inspire others. You certainly had checked the block today. I want to thank you for that. Can people get in touch with you if they hear this?
Yeah, absolutely. My LinkedIn is probably the best way to get me. I'd like to say I respond to every single message I get. If I don't respond within a day, message me again, but I'm pretty good about getting to people within about 24 hours. And I have had several people reach out, including Will Cunningham. He actually reached out to me because he heard me on another podcast. And I've even had people come in and tour my shop. I had somebody yesterday in that was like, hey, I'm going to be in the area. I heard your podcast. You're right next to the airport. Can I just come hang out with you for an hour? And I did that. I've done that 3 or 4 times now. I think I'm doing it with somebody tomorrow too. So yeah, I know. Hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn. If you send me a message, if you want to chat, I'll give you my cell. We can chat. And yeah, so many people paid it forward to allow me to get here. The least I can do is pay it forward and allow people to continue, because I really want to see more veterans in this space. Because I think we can do a great thing.
I appreciate that, man. If you don't mind, we'll put your LinkedIn link in the description section of the YouTube version of this. Look, for 13 years we've been doing VETtoCEO. We've yet to meet a guy like you or a gal that hasn't said what you just said. As a tribe, we like to help each other, and we're all at different levels of experience with this stuff. We need to stick together, so I appreciate you endorsing that approach. Look, we're going to wrap it up now. Michael, I really want to thank you for this. Is one of the best interviews we've done, and I appreciate it. And your stories are like so real. And you've done it, you really don't know about it till you do it, right? And when people like you tell those stories, they're invaluable. So I want to thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So on behalf of VETtoCEO, and yeah, thanks, man. And good luck with the business, and let's stay in touch.